from miles down.
Well, again, the Aikido movements are their archetypes, and so when we hit these archetypes, it tunes our structure. In Shinto, there's something called the himorogi. Himorogi literally means a temporary resting place for divine solar power, a place that you invite Kami-sama to come. For instance, if we do a ceremony away from the shrine, maybe a groundbreaking or something of that nature, and there's no shrine at that place, then we construct a himorogi and invite Kami-sama to come. That himorogi is an antenna. So Aikido is basically this wonderful way to shape your antenna. So through the Aikido movements, we are purifying our ki. We are coming into the current moments. So we can communicate with the divine world, and so we can hear the whisper of nature and become more true human beings. The movements themselves are the archetypes. But the movements, again, there's the internal aspect of the movements. There is of course waza, but really more importantly, there's making the internal connections. So when the structure becomes alive and awake, then really great things come. Shinto is that Aikido is the really great way to know the heart of Shinto.
Oh, great. There's another question. I've heard you describe Aikido as the yoga of Shinto. Can you explain it a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, well, yoga has for instance, asana. Of course, I can't speak about yoga. I don't really do. I did some years and years and years ago. But from my very limited understanding, yoga has asana, has various postures, and those postures are archetypes. So hitting those archetypes, means that understanding floods in. And so the same thing is true with the Aikido. When we really hit the archetypes, when we make the angles, by making those archetypes, we receive information.
Can you explain a little bit what you mean with archetypes in the bodily form, in posture?
Well, so for instance, in yoga, there are the various asanas, which I don't know anything about any of them, so I couldn't really speak. But the various forms that we're doing to do the Aikido, to swing the sword, to hold the sword, to bring things together, to the when we're first trying to move a stick or something like that, we're very uncoordinated. We can't get our ki to the end of the stick. We can't connect between heaven and earth. We can't extend the radius. But through training, we come to various obstacles. We come through physiological obstacles, emotional obstacles, and all those things. And to continue, we have to find our way through those. And we get to the archetypes. Once we manifest the archetypes, information comes.
Okay. May I myself ask a question about that? Because would you then say that when you look at Aikido today, would you say that that you see it? You can see it at certain places or in certain ways of practicing, or is there an element of it in all Aikido, in just going through the form that we have, or do you see that is specifically emphasized in certain schools or with certain teachers, or
of course I can't
no name calling.
But the aliveness is really important. Again, the aliveness is really important. I believe you have some Aikido alive. Alive is really important. So the Aikido is Misogi, Aikido is Budo. Both those things are very true. So for instance, Aikido Yagami, the main teacher. If we were to encapsulate the teaching of the Aikido ancestor Kami, it's to stand firmly on the sacred earth, purify various obstacles, and make progress step by step. The same thing is true of Aikido. We have to come into the current moment, We have to purify whatever is keeping us from really manifesting divine waza, and then we can progress.
Mm. There's nothing.
And you know, sometimes you see kind of empty aikido, and that's kind of too bad. But you know, it's you know, it's got to be alive. It's you know, there are those internal connections. When you look at someone, you can see if, you know, is it happening or is it not? Is you is or is you ain't? You know, it's got to be happening.
Cool. There's a question from Jim Alvarez here. The story of O-sensei's initial connection to Tsubaki Okami Yashiro. When, how, first experiences, if you know them, of O-sensei.
Well, interesting enough, he was guided to Tsubaki Grand Shrine by Hikituchi Sensei. So during O-sensei Satoru, of course, Saduraiko Kami-sama, guardian kami of Aikido, main kami-sama Tsubaki Shrine, appeared to him and gave him the mission, his personal mission, as well as the mission of Aikido. He then searched for many years for the main shrine. You know, there was no internet then. so as there was no internet, it took him a while to find the main shrine. There are many shrines of Saduraiko Kami-sama. There are probably 3,000 shrines to Saduraiko Kami-sama. But Tsubaki Okami Yashiro is without fail number one, the Daihongu, the original place, the place of origin, and that's been well established. So when he discovered that, Hikituchi Sensei guided him to Tsubaki Shrine, and because of, you know, they were in Hikituchi Sensei in Wakayama, is not so far, not the Kii Peninsula is not that far from Yekin, but of course in those days it was further than it is now, and you know, again, there was no internet, so it was a really big deal for him to find that shrine and to find the original place of Saduraiko Kami-sama. And it was then that he asked Sensei Guji, he asked the grandfather of the current Guji to enshrine Saduraiko Kami-sama in the Aiki Jinja as the main Kami-sama. Then Sensei Guji at that time was too old and asked his son to do it, who was my main teacher.
Thank you.
And so when O-sensei was there, of course he did misogi there many times, and he also made embu in front of a kami-sama, you know, and you know, misogi no jo, misogi and kotama, that sort of thing.
Thank you. Jim is also asking about misogi practice prep exercises, particularly funikogi undo, and the difference between how it's done in Aikido practice and the Shinto way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So funikogi undo in Shinto world called Ame no Torifune no Gyo. Ame no Torifune no Gyo is really quite fascinating. The way, what is that? And there's a kind of a movement. Let's see. So, and the way we do both for Aiki and for Misogi Junbi Taiso is a kind of first left leg up on its side, and it's up. It's this kind of movement. Hey, 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 hey. And then so, Furitama, right? Hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey, ho, hey. Hey, sa, hey, sa, hey, sa. So it's this kind of, it's really this, you know, like turning this huge clog. Gah, gah. And there's a, you know, there's a little bit of the toy sensei hips, hands model. And it's really, you know, it's really creating this wave and creating this wave off the earth. It's kind of fascinating. That's Ame no Torifune.
Great, thank you. Let's see. From Noah, could you please talk about ukemi and how to be open to receiving blessings from the universe? Also, is this part of how you stay so youthful? Thank you.
Say again?
Also, is this part of how you stay so youthful?
Maybe so. Yeah, I'm 70, and but I'm 70. I know Kanwe Tora, but I have quite energetic, you know, and yeah, misogi is really important. You know, it's big. I know ukemi is really important. It's the receiving, but it's the activity. So sometimes people, ukemi is a really kind of bailing practice. You know, people stay connected for a moment and then they're just looking for a place to go. And I feel the nature of that connection, keeping connection, keeping your center connected to Aite is really, really important. And throughout the nature of the interaction, both before, during, and after the interaction, which is the meaning of triangle, circle, square. So yeah, ukemi is super important, and it's because it defines how we respond. You know, we talked a little bit about mind and soul earlier. I guess it was me. I was talking, but you know, we can think one thing, but when something startles us, how do we respond? How do we act? And ukemi really teaches us the ability to observe, to receive, and yet still be extending the key forward all at the same time. Ukemi is really quite marvelous. Super, super, super important. It's one of the great gifts of Aiki.
Okay. There's a question about wanting to learn more about Shinkon and what the meaning of Shinkon is and what kind of practice that involves.
Yeah, maybe we should do something at some point. Shinkon is really a complicated process in a way. I made at one time a simplified form. The shrine has a Facebook group, and the Facebook group has some files, and there's a simplified form of Shinkon in that. That's really, really a useful practice. It's of course we don't have enough time to go into it now, but it is really, I've considered, since we've been doing things on Zoom, maybe making some kind of like Shinkon seminar, because it is really a fascinating process, and there's really quite a lot of depth there. Again, I was so passionate to learn about Shinkon and to understand Sensei's process, and so then I had the good fortune to become a teacher of Shinkon, and then some very, very interesting things have happened around Shinkon over the years. In that my original Shinkon teacher's name is Kawashima Toshitaku, Jin-san knows, who is the Guji of his own shrine now, but at one time was a very senior priest at Tsubaki Grand Shrine, and who had spent many years with the Guji of Isunkami Jinja. In any case, he made me a teacher over a period of time of the really Isunkami Jinja form of Shinkon, which is the most original form of Shinkon by far. In any case, then we had a big group of people in the dojo I had before this, and then when I built this shrine, who were practicing, and the Sendai Guji, the previous Guji, used to come every year and visit us, and he always saw us do this big group, this big Shinkon Kai, big group who would practice the Shinkon. He saw us practicing, and he would always say, "Oh, no, change this, change this." It was really very strange because we were practicing the real original form. And Kawashima, Reverend Kawashima, always kind of didn't really like it. Previous Guji was kind of remembering or recreating this other form of Shinkan that it was unclear whether he was creating something new or remembering something really old. And he then went to the Guji of Ise Kotai Jingu, actually Dai Guji. Ise Kotai Jingu is without fail the apex of Japan's 100,000 Shinto shrines. It's the main shrine to the sun deity. It's the most important shrine in Japan without fail. It's the only shrine that has a Dai Guji. I met him, which is kind of like, if you were a Catholic, it'd be like, Pope wants to see you. He wanted to see me. But in any case, Guji and Dai Guji kind of put together this even more original form of Shinkan, which we then introduced to a really special group called the Nisogi Tokubetsu Shuhokai. We introduced, I was a priest who introduced it to a big group in Japan at some point. And so I know all those forms, and I do a number of variations, and we do variations at the end of each Aikido training sessions as well. And I think maybe if there was enough interest, we would make some kind of way to do maybe via Zoom, since it's difficult to travel these days. But it's a complicated process. The fascinating thing about it again is that Shinkan really deals with the soul. And again, although it's euphemistically called Shinto meditation, it doesn't. Shinkan does not care about the mind at all. The mind is fine, but it kind of, the Shinkan view of the mind is more or less, it's like television. It's entertainment, but no real meaning. You know, so.
Great. I have a question. Sensei spoke a lot about the revelation of love, like his Aikido
Yes.
being the path of love.
Yes.
And how do you view that from your Shinto perspective or from your Aikido perspective, and how do you view that whole question of the understanding of love in relationship?
Well, of course, usually people think, of course, it's difficult semantically when people say love. Always we think romantic love, and this is a different kind of love. You know, that wonderful Sensei quote about the divine love flows through everything. You and I, and everything in the universe exists part of the endless flow of a kami-sama's love. That is a kind of, and in a way, all the really most important mythological when we think of the most important well-known stories of, if we call them stories, of the kind of shinwa, mythological happenings, like Tenson Korin, when Kami-sama were guided to earth, Amatsukami guided to earth by Saraiku Kami-sama. That was kind of like a wave of love from heaven to earth. You know, basically everything works on love. Everything works. It's the stuff. It's just. I think I think the ancient Greeks had many words, a number of words for love, and we're in English kind of constrained to just one, and so it becomes kind of confusing. It's a different force, manifestations of a different force.
Okay, we have a question from Ted Orwell. Do you feel like Shinto shrines outside Japan could enshrine the mitama of local cultural heroes to make Shinto more intimately connected to the lives of the people in that region?
Well, I don't know about local cultural heroes. It depends on the heroes. You know, so I think there's a Hilo Daijingu, but there's one of the shrines in Honolulu enshrines George Washington. But to be honest, they did that just because they didn't really want to. You know, I don't want to say anything about it. It wasn't really a movement from they just wanted to be more accessible to get along better with American culture people.
I have,
for instance, this shrine enshrines many kami-sama, main kami-sama, Saraiku kami-sama, his wife, Ame no Zume no Mikoto are the main Kami-sama. But also, Amaterasu Omi Kami is enshrined, Kami-sama of the sun. Also, Ugami Tama no Kami-sama, also known as Inari Okami, is enshrined. There's an Inari, a very popular deity. But also, Beikoku Kokudo Kunimitama no Kami, Kami-sama of the North American continent, is enshrined. And also, the place of this shrine building is, but always, shrines also always say, Amatu Kami, Kunichi Kami, Yaoyorozu, Chihoyorozu Kami-sama, heavenly Kami, earthly Kami, 8 billion myriads, 1,000 million myriads, infinite Kami. So all local Kami-sama are already there. But in terms of shrines outside of Japan, local cultural heroes, it really depends. It'd be kind of case by case.
I would like to ask you, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I really think
I was done.
I heard the story that when Sensei had enshrined in the Aiki Jinja in Iwama in Japan, that the kami that he enshrined, I don't know if there are 49 or a number of them, they were representations of his revelations and insights, that many of the gods, many of the kami are different perspectives or aspects of reality that you find through your spiritual path when you're going through an awakening process, or like you said, the process of how would you describe the process from what to what? And if the kami are representations.
Whoa. Please say again how to make that as a question.
Well, first of all, I that also say enshrined in
the many Kami-sama enshrined, Aiki Jinja, yes.
That these kamis are aspects of your spiritual process path, of as you are coming to a deeper.
Yeah, kami kind of a morphogenetic field. So there's Kami-sama of everything. There's all kinds of Kami-sama. So again, when we think of Kami-sama enshrined here, Kami-sama of the local continent, North American continent, but also Kami-sama of local mountain. And, so there's many, there's infinite Kami-sama. We can view everything as Kami-sama. Everything, the basic of Shinto is that everything has mitama, soul, and that everything, and it's all connected. It's kind of like cutting edge of quantum thinking. It's like everything emerges from and returns to the quantum field. So we could view the quantum field as just another way to say, Dai Shizen no Miguri, the infinite movements of great nature. So it's really, so yeah, we could say it's part of our own process, but that might be a little bit too thinking too much of our own process. So there's a lot going on, and our process is just our ability to come into harmony with it, or to perceive it, or to remove the obstructions between us and all that stuff going on. But I don't think the phases of our process are that important. It's just vaguely entertaining, that's all. Just my thinking.
But the mythology of, for example, the Kojiki with the Amaterasu Okami, with the whole, the way I've seen it, a lot of the learning has come from. They are stories that can be understood and through insight and deep study yourself of internal process that is not different than any human beings, but it's a realization of these stories that are spelled out in the Kojiki, for example.
Yeah, interesting thing about Kojiki is, of course, there's pre-material stages of evolution. There's various aspects, and then it gets down to historical part. But really interesting, of course, the pre-material stages of evolution are really fascinating. For instance, there were the 5 Kami-sama of the Big Bang that old Sensei was really into, and then then 15 Kami-sama later in 7 generations was the creation of the solar system, and then after the creation of the solar system was the part of that was the creation of Onogoro Jima, self-condensed. Sometimes Onogoro Jima is meant to be thought to be just the islands of Japan, but Onogoro Jima also means self-condensing ball, which, oh gosh, self-condensing ball, that's pretty much the process, the geological process of the bits of the matter, congealing and forming the earth. And so, and then there was what was called Kamiumi, Shimaumi, age of birth of Kami and birth of islands. Basically that every action that happened, created a mini Kami. But that's kind of like O-sensei's process with just that's really analogous in a way, isn't it, to O-sensei's process of if you're really standing in the middle, if you're really standing on Amen Ukihashi, which means you're the place in between. If you're really in that place in between, then stuff just manifests, and that's really I think a Kamiumi Shima mythological age is now. It's we tend to think of it as some alternate dimension or ancient past or some combination thereof, and I think it's kind of now. I think this is the mythological age.
Yeah, you just brought it up, what I was actually thinking of the next question of the floating bridge of heaven.
Yes. Amen Ukihashi. Floating bridge.
No, please. Because
that's the place in between. So the in between place is really, really important. Interestingly enough, when talking about the mission of Aiki, and the mission of Aiki in relating to Oharai no Kotoba, the esoteric way to think of the Oharai no Kotoba is that the difficulties we face come about from the time between action and non-action, and that's a place in between. So that would be, the Ame Nukashi means bridge between basic duality, in and yo, uchiki, sotoki, inside ki, outside ki, yin and yang. The place in between. In Buddhism, don't they say something about this shore and the far shore, and so the place in between is Ame Nukashi. So Ame Nukashi ultimately means the current moment. So it's coming into being really consciously in the current moment is standing on Ame Nukashi. So that's my opinion about Ame Nukashi.
There's a question. Thank you. There's a question here. What is the unasked question you would be most interested in answering?
No idea.
Dorian does continue saying, I will accept laughter as an answer to that. Dorian.
You got that.
Right. We have 5 minutes left, a little bit more.
I hope people enjoy it. If people are interested in the Shinto, please enjoy our Facebook page. There's lots of really in-depth information. Again, because I was in this Forrest Gump kind of way, just so lucky to have so incredible teachers. And what happened to me, it couldn't happen in the current time. It's just the world has changed, and so I just was at the right place at the right time, and some very lucky things happened. And I share that information in depth quite a bit, and it might be of some interest.
Yes, and there have been several questions about Shinto specifically, and so your answer there is beautiful. There's a question about the Kotodama, the importance of Kotodama in Aikido. How do you view Kotodama, the Kotodama practice?
Kotodama, again, is a kind of a, life power. Sometimes people think Kotodama when Kotodama, Shinto Kigaku means study of ki, and there's a bunch of different aspects. There's Kyusei Kigaku, study of the nine saki. There's a Kototama, study of a soul of words. Ototama, soul of the sounds. Often when people say Kotodama, they mean Ototama. But basically, things are frequency. So Kami-sama often manifests as frequency. So it's not really, when people have really direct experience of Kami-sama, sometimes it's people often use metaphors because there's no language for the real thing, which is frequency. So it's not really quite like a ball of light or quite like a sound, but it's some frequency. It's difficult to, the kind of our language only encompasses. We could only encompass a certain range of things with our language, and it's such a tiny fraction of the bandwidth that's going on all the time. So language is really limited in that sense. But Kotodama is basically the study of it's where frequency, the study of frequency meets the study of words. So there are various sounds, a, o, u, e, I, and the parent sounds, child sounds, et cetera, the 50 sounds, all that stuff.
Thank you. I hope we haven't been able to read you all the questions, and I apologize for everybody who has maybe an unanswered question out there, but do be in contact with Sensei.
Yeah, ask it. I'll do my best to answer on the Facebook page or that kind of thing.
And we're coming to the end. We have less than a minute left, so I must give my great. I was lovely to meet you, and lovely.
It's nice to meet you.
And I'm sure we could go on forever, but time is up, and well, maybe it will lead to something more because.
So just quick take. Again, is that so many incredible challenges we face as at this point, and Aikido is incredibly important because Aikido is a way that we can develop the listening body. That we can quiet a bunch of stuff. We naturally in accomplishing Aikiwaza, in removing the obstructions that keep us from accomplishing Aikiwaza, we can